Please stay rise for the pledge to the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Like Mr. Taft said, we asked you to be here because for those of us who were alive 20 years ago tomorrow, we will not forget where we were at the moment the events of 9/11 happened. Those of us remember what we were wearing, what the weather was like, who we were with, sights, sounds, and smells. But for those of you, there's not any of you that were alive on that day, and it's important for us, especially as an educational community, to be sure you guys know the details of that day and those events and how they shaped our world, our country, and our daily lives. So in recognition of the heroes and those people who lost their lives on 9/11 20 years ago tomorrow, please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn things over to our Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Taft.
So as you know, 20 years ago tomorrow marks 2 decades since the Twin Towers fell, since the Pentagon was nearly destroyed, and since a plane crashed in southwestern Pennsylvania by the name of Shanksville, Pennsylvania. It's important that we don't forget these things. More importantly, it's important that you understand some of the history of 9/11. But before we do that, I cannot proceed in this ceremony and in discussing this without first acknowledging our dignitaries that have shown up from local fire, volunteer fire, Genesee County Sheriff's Office, New York State Troopers, who took the time today to come here for you to make sure that you understand and have an opportunity to connect history with real living examples of bravery, service, sacrifice, and community-mindedness. I want to thank the Genesee County Sheriff's Office, particularly Deputy Meyer for being a point person. Chief Deputy Friday, thank you very much. I would also like to thank Mr. Nate Fix from the Alexander Fire Department for coordinating all of the equipment that you see around here. The big trucks can't come down onto the field because the ground is too soft, but it is no small task to get all of this equipment here for you to be able to enjoy and to cement into your memory the importance of 9/11 and the acts of those days. So thank you to all of our guests for your time, effort, and service today. So at the time of 9/11, just a little history for myself. I was a teacher in New York City public schools at the time. In fact, Mrs. Wickham alluded that anyone who was alive at that time, especially working with kids, you knew where you were. I was in an assembly with my students, believe it or not, about character education and good behavior and good choices and being a good citizen. And we heard news that a plane hit one of the towers. Now, in New York City, little planes buzz around all over the place, and once in a while a little plane will clip a building and you really don't hear about it. But then when you start asking questions, like, no, it was a big plane. It was like a jet plane. We're like, whoa, that's not right. And then we got news that a second plane hit. And so I remember very distinctly where I was that day and the days thereafter. But we can get into that history of mine a little bit later. But at the time in the world, for everybody, there was political and religious unrest everywhere. Much of it was aimed at the United States and what the United States stood for. The United States had been in about a decade-long war already in the Middle East. We were tried to focus on strength, freedom, bravery, peacekeeping. But tomorrow, at 8:46 a.m., the war in the Middle East was brought to us. 20 years ago tomorrow was when 2 flights left Boston. and they were bound for vacation. It was Flight 11 and Flight 175 of United Airlines. These flights were taking mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, babies, business people, brothers, sisters. They were going on vacation, business meetings, or off to see loved ones. At 8:46 a.m., Flight 11 smashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. 17 minutes later, at 9:03, Flight 175, there's a beast trying to get me now. Flight 175 did the same to the South Tower, and over a little hour later, those gigantic buildings collapsed with people in them. No one really understood what was happening until 9:37 when American Airlines Flight 177 left Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. and crashed into the Pentagon. A fourth plane had been hijacked at that time as well that took off from Newark Airport in New Jersey and crashed in a southwestern Pennsylvania town called Shanksville that's not much different than Alexander. These planes were taken by people who disliked everything that America stood for, and they intentionally wanted to hurt Americans and the American spirit. The plane in Shanksville was actually crashed by the passengers. While they were on the plane, they had gotten the news that planes were being hijacked, and no one really understood what was going on, but they knew that these hijacked planes were being crashed into large buildings where there were a lot of people. The Shanksville passengers joined together in bravery and service and selflessness to fight back their attackers as best they could. That resulted in the plane ultimately crashing in a field where everyone on the plane was lost, but no other people on the ground were hurt. Now, all of these events, the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and Shanksville, it really only took a few hours from beginning to end. So on that day, about 3,000 people were killed. Many of them have yet to be identified. In fact, earlier this week, 2 more people were identified from the rubble and the wreckage of the World Trade Center attacks and the Pentagon attacks. Now, here's some information to give you a bigger idea of what the hijackers were trying to do. You need to understand that at the World Trade Center, there was more than 35,000 people that worked in those 2 buildings, and even more around in the buildings. The World Trade Center housed 430 companies, where people went every day, just like we come here every day, just to go to work. The Pentagon, which is the central office building for all of our military operations and offices, where they plan almost everything out of the Pentagon. 26,000 people, mothers, fathers, aunts, and uncles worked there. In all, there were 19 hijackers and countless others who plans the attacks on our soil. I'm humbled to be surrounded by these service providers and first responded, because on that day in New York City alone, 343 firefighters lost their lives. 23 members of the New York City Police Department, 37 officers from the Port Authority. There were 184 people killed at the Pentagon and 40 in Shanksville. And I want to let you know, none of those numbers include the hijackers that were attacking us. I refuse to include their names or numbers in any of this. The fires that were caused by the World Trade Center burned for days, sometimes too hot to get even close to. But while those fires burned, rescuers, much like the people behind me, much like the people that drove up in those trucks, they dug through the rubble by hand because they couldn't use machines. They were using buckets, anything that they could put debris in, to make sure that not one single person was overlooked. There are countless stories of heroism of regular people in the towers too, not just firemen and police, who tried to help people. The people on the Shanksville flight and in the Pentagon, they were injured and burned, but they still tried to help others who were wounded and couldn't get out. Mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, and strangers joined together to try to escape the fires in the Pentagon and the World Trade Center. Fire and police from all parts of New York City raced to Ground Zero in hopes to save the others, when all they could see above was an inferno blackened out by the sky. Many were saved that day, but many were not. At the end of September 11th, President Bush stood on a pile of rubble at Ground Zero in New York City, and he promised America that the war on terrorism had officially begun. And since that day, America has drastically changed. Now, regardless of politics or religious beliefs, this is what we are asking you following this day. Always remember the patriotism that was reinvigorated and born on 9/11. It was about helping other people. It was remember the first responders and the military folks who gave up their safety for us and your loved ones. The folks that are here today, although they may not have responded directly to 9/11 in New York City or the Pentagon, but I can promise you, the people behind me are a symbol and a testament that they will answer the call anytime you need them. They will answer the call out of service, selflessness, bravery, kindness, sacrifice, risk to their own selves, and patriotism for all of us. Their service is an example and a symbol for all of us to always remember the heroism and dedication of those people on that day, and those acts of heroism is what makes America great. We must take these messages and examples with all of us in everything that we do here at school and in our community. We must be good to each other. We must trust each other to be good to our communities. We must be brave when our brothers and sisters in the community need us just to be good neighbors, good classmates, and good citizens. If you take anything with you today or tomorrow when you watch this stuff on TV, because it'll be covered tomorrow, take this with you, please. Life is precious. Lead a good life of kindness, a good life of service, a life of patriotism. Be good to each other. Help those in need. Be a friend to the friendless. Keep an eye on those who might not be able to stand up for themselves. Show appreciation for your community by representing it proudly. Next to me, you'll see a flag blowing that doesn't look like a typical American flag. This is the flag of heroes. It will be on display in our district. We'll take turns between the buildings, but it'll be on display as it's the name of all of those first responders who lost their lives that day. Please take time to just read off a couple of names, because those names are someone's father, someone's mother, someone's sister that didn't come home because of their act of bravery. So, as a token of our appreciation for the service to the folks on the flag, but those behind us who represent the folks on this flag, you will be presented with a Trojan pin as a token of thanks for your service and dedication to keeping us all safe. Sometimes you do that at the risk of your own safety at any moment, because much like the people, the police, the fire, and the folks on 9/11 did, you may not return home some night to your loved ones because of your service to us. We will not take your service and sacrifice for granted, and we are truly grateful to you and your brothers and sisters in uniform for everything that you do. Therefore, and I think Deputy Meyer has them somewhere, this token is a Trojan pin that I always wear proudly. Please take this Trojan pin with you and treat it as your official welcome to our Trojan family from now on and forevermore. You are an Alexander Trojan, and you can always count on Alexander to welcome you home. Before we do that, I would like to recognize Mrs. Heather Cummings. Many of you may not know that, but at the time of 9/11, Mrs. Cummings was active in the military service, and she was there and present. Mrs. Cummings, thank you for your service. So as you can see, this gets me a little bit, and that's okay, because the gravity of this day and tomorrow is something that I really need you to pay attention to. And the folks that you see zooming around in the nice cars with the lights on, and the men and women that operate the fire equipment, first responding is an important thing to our service. And be good to each other, be good to your school, and please enjoy the rest of the day. And thank you so much for being an outstanding audience this morning. Thank you.